In 2010, British Petroleum was responsible for the accidental dumping of 4.9 million barrels of petroleum into the Gulf of Mexico, the effects of which were nothing short of devastating. The Gulf was left in a state of total pollution, and 11 lives were lost. In the wake of the incident, British Petroleum's CEO, Tony Hayward, released a video entitled, "I'm Sorry," to be aired on national television. The ad lasted 1 minute. And during this 1 minute, Hayward spoke of British Petroleum's efforts to clean up the Gulf. He spoke of the number of boats and planes and people involved in the relief effort, unnecessarily deviating from his true purpose, to apologize. You see, Hayward spent so much time saying the wrong thing that he forgot what was right. We, as viewers of all this, well, we feel a sense of disconnect. And it's when we lose that connection between speaker and audience, that a message becomes lost. iPhones, iPads, smartwatches, they've revolutionized the way that we communicate with one another. But they deceive us. They lead us to believe that that connection lasts a lifetime. We've all been the recipient of that 10-page email or those 10 consecutive texts. It's frustrating. It creates that same level of disconnect. Ultimately, we can type forever, but our attention spans, our desire to connect, will always be limited. How many of you, just a show of hands, have ever seen a video on YouTube before? Great, so I figured that would be the majority. Anyways, I want you to think about that ad that plays before your video and how you have 5 seconds before you can click skip ad. Now imagine you're the producer of that ad. You have 5 seconds in order to establish that connection between speaker and audience, viewer in this case, that will make someone want to stay the duration. 5 seconds. Your attention span is predetermined. Now, as you might imagine, millions of ads are skipped every day on YouTube, and the ones that aren't, usually contain superstars like Dwayne Johnson or Julia Roberts in them. But I don't think that you should have to be The Rock in order to connect with people. Take Winston Churchill, former British Prime Minister who had a stutter and definitely did not have The Rock's muscles as an example. It goes without saying that Churchill was one of the most controversial figures in history. But I do think that it's safe to say that whether you liked him or disliked him, it was very difficult to ignore him. Churchill's command of the English language was unparalleled, and he brought his personal beliefs to life in a way that was unprecedented. But what really set Churchill apart from everyone else is that he had this intense desire to communicate effectively. One way in which he did so is that he spoke in a manner that was very concise, right? It was generally pretty easy to understand him. There's something called the one-sentence method, developed by Dr. Mimi Goss of Harvard University. And the idea of this is that you should be able to describe your message in a single, memorable sentence. Now, Churchill was the master of this. In politics, if you do not know what to do, do nothing. If you do not know what to say what you really think. Churchill spoke these words in 1905, and obviously they're very powerful, right? They say a lot about who he is and what he believes in. But I think, more importantly, they're so short and they're so sweet that we can remember and cherish them even today. Another thing Churchill was known for was turning his speeches into a conversation between speaker and audience. Some of you may have seen the film recently released, Darkest Hour, based on his life. Anyways, there's a scene in this film that depicts Churchill boarding a London train and asking everyday citizens whether they thought England should fight Germany in World War II. Should we fight? He says. Churchill proves here that a good speech, just like a conversation, is one where it's more about the other person than yourself. He proves that as a communicator, one of the most valuable skills to have is being able to listen. We recognize Churchill as this great communicator that he was because of his ability to boil ideas down. Should we fight? To boil ideas down, but with intense purpose. But you know what? If you can't take it from Churchill, one of the greatest public speakers of all time, take it from me. My dad was always a stickler for poor comments or explanations that were even slightly too long. I would be mid-sentence and all of a sudden he'd stop me and say, no, sorry, you need to start over, you need to be more articulate. And everyone in my family thought this was funny, right? He was kind of known for this. Until over the summer, I read Dr. Mimi Goss, the inventor of the one-sentence method's book, What is Your One Sentence? And I realized what I was doing wrong. And I realized how important the lesson my dad was teaching me was. You see, I was failing to engage him. It was less about what I was saying versus how I was saying it. That connection between speaker and audience, it just wasn't there. And even though he, as my dad, may have made the effort to listen to me, he recognized a future situation in which a potential client or even a professor might not do the same. So it was from then on that I made it my goal to speak in a manner that was concise and intentional. And I remember toward the end of the summer, I was explaining something to my dad, and I finished talking, and instead of his usual remark, he just kind of went, yeah, okay. And I thought, wow. It's an adrenaline rush. That's how it feels as a communicator when you're one with your audience. Thank you.